over the course of time, have fallen into a lot of these quotes that I may not know who did it or who said it the first time.
Sure.
One of the things that Jim Harbaugh did a great job of establishing at Stanford when he got here was the idea that it's team, team, team.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the quote, team, team, team. And I think the application is just tremendously universal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what team it is. I don't care what job it is. When you're working for someone, you're working with someone, you're working as a team.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was that no man is bigger than the team, and everything that you do should be aimed at improving the team, or in some way each of us has their own responsibility to make that team better. And by raising one another up by your actions, then the whole team benefits and everybody raises up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the idea was to get away from the selfishness. We're in a me society. We're in a right now society. You know, we started when I was a kid anyway, when McDonald's first started, and it was a great thing that all of a sudden, two all the way, a fry and a Coke, and you could get it like that, and you were out the gate and,
mm-hmm.
and on your way. So everybody expects instant results and that kind of thing. But it is a marathon, and it's not a sprint. And the idea of building a team and getting young people to buy into some cause bigger than themselves. And it's a constant battle, as we all know in coaching. It's a constant battle because there's so much me. And you can't develop a team when you have the me. And the best thing that you have when you have your best players that are the leaders, and they've bought into that process, then you really have a chance for your team, your program, your company, whatever it might be, to take off and be successful. The best example I could possibly give you is Andrew Luck. The guy forewent a whole bunch of money to come out of the draft in his junior year and decided against it, where he was the consensus #1 pick in the draft. Didn't do it because he wanted to come back and play with his teammates. But underneath all of that, I think one of the things you'd find out about this guy is that he came back so that he could help his teammates be better.
Wow.
Some of his really good friends were going to have a chance to play, and he wanted to be able to help contribute to their success. There's hundreds of stories about this guy and his ability to put the team in front of himself. And it was very apparent when you'd see him in the locker room after a game, and maybe he had completed 8, 10, 12, 15 passes in a row, and the reporters were always, geez, oh man, Andrew, that was great, you were really hot, you had 15 completions in a row. And his response was always to deflect the praise, grab the chaos and the blame game, grab all that and put it on his shoulders, take it off his teammates. So if they were complimenting him about all the passes and all that type of thing, the first thing he would tell them was, did you see the kind of protection I had? Do you realize how good those guys did up front, how great a job they did in order to give me time to scan the field to find the open receiver? Or it was, but did you see the catches the receivers made? Geez, anybody could have made those throws because they had good protection, receivers ran good routes, and they caught the ball. That made it pretty easy. You know, the guy was always one to deflect the praise, accept all the blame. If a guy dropped the ball and they wanted to talk about that with him, it wasn't the guy's fault. I was late on the throw. It was probably a little bit behind him, maybe a little bit too low. I should have made a better throw. He'd had a better chance to make the catch. So when a guy does that on a team, as you well know, the other guys rally around him, particularly when it's your best player.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy's the best football player in the country. But that was his makeup. Now, he probably got a lot of that from his dad. You know, his dad had been a quarterback. His dad had been in pro sports and that kind of thing, so he'd been around that. But he still had the chance to go the other way because he received tremendous amounts of publicity, tremendous amounts of praise were heaped upon him. But if you watched him go through the work ethic part of it, and you watched him in the weight room, and you watched him in the workouts where you're outside running and that kind of thing, he was in every drill. There was no prima donna in him. You know, if it was the sprints, wind sprints at the end of practice, he was in every one. Never looked to take a play off, never looked to take a day off. never wanted a day off, never wanted a play off, would have loved to play every game because he had a great passion for the game and he had a great passion for the idea of team. Do that. But I think my high school football coach used to say this, that you get out of a man what you expect. And I said, okay, I expect to be great. He expects me to be great, blah, blah, blah. But somehow the player, you need to convey that to the player, that he knows what it is you expect and how he expects you to achieve that. And if those things aren't put down there, and I don't care if you're running McDonald's or you're running the biggest venture capital firm in the world, whatever it is that you're doing, and you have people working for you, they need to know what you expect of them. They need to know how they're expected to comport themselves to achieve the goals that you help them set. And I always thought that with players, that you need to help them set some goals, but and you need to have a discussion with each of them to get to know them on an individual basis, because they're all different. They all come from different life experiences. But the idea of, I expect you to be great. Now, do you expect you to be great? And are you willing to do what's necessary to get there? And I'll lay out some steps for you that I think, but we need to talk about those things so that we know how to get there. And if you don't expect to be great, but you expect to be good, but I expect you to be great, we're going to have a clash somewhere in there. So the expectations have to be the same. If I, as the coach, have a higher expectation of you as a player than you have for yourself, then you're going to be frustrated and I'm going to be frustrated, because I'm always going to be trying to push you or lead you or pull you to be better than you really maybe necessarily want to be. So somewhere in there, that discussion has to take place. Because yeah, I expect from a guy that he's going to do things the right way, that he's going to do them with a passion, that he's going to be enthusiastic about it, and it's going to be important to him. Is that too much to ask of a guy? Now, what other things are important, and where do they all fit in the big scheme of things? But I think if we can get those things across to young people, to young employees, I see lots of things go on in terms of young employees. I see lots of young guys getting into coaching, that a year after they've been in, they expect to be a coordinator, and then 2 years after that, they expect to be the head coach. Right. And there's very little, in some cases, investment in their future. When we started, and I sound like an old guy talking, but I am. But when we started, you were willing to do anything. Yeah. I can remember painting locker rooms when I was at Kent State University. We painted the locker room before spring practice. We painted the floor. The coaches did it. Mm-hmm. And whatever needed to be done, we were willing to do. We go to the USFL, we lined the fields. Our first training camp, the coaches lined the fields. Mm-hmm. And we did it with our hands. We didn't have a machine. Yeah. We cut the grass with lawnmowers, not power mowers, push mowers. So I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into that. When you say you're going to get from a man what you expect, have an expectation that you want him to be successful. And successful may not mean the same thing for every guy. How many guys have we seen that have been challenged from the standpoint of having tremendous physical ability, but they do have something inside them? Their heart pounds, they've got that passion to be good. They want to help one another. They don't want to let anybody down. They're fighting to be successful. I think guys that have those traits are going to be every bit as successful in life as the guys that have the funky mustaches and all that stuff, and guys not shaving. And that's a part of evolution, I guess. But we do reflect society, but we do, I think, have, in general, higher standards than what a lot of other people do. And I do think that when players are willing to do that, they come out so much richer for the experience. And the guys that were when I say firm, I don't mean, again, heavy-handed, this is the line. These are the things we believe that are going to make us a better team. If you all buy into it, we got a chance. Now, if you're not buying into it, then we won't have a chance, because we'll spend so much ancillary time on trying to get you to buy in, or trying to get you to follow the rules, regulations, standards for performance, whatever those things may be that you call them, that we're not working on getting better as a team.
That's, you know, for how many years you been coaching, by the way?
48.
Okay, so yeah, a couple days.
Yeah, a lot of, I mean, and I was fortunate that I grew up in an area where football and sports were important. You know, it was an industrial area in Northeast Ohio, small towns, but everybody took great pride in their team. You know, they liked their stars, but they took pride in their team, and that kind of was deeply rooted in me from day one. Now the idea was in that area, and that area produced Joe Montana, and it produced Joe Namath, and you know, Northeast Ohio, Northwest Pennsylvania. All these guys were within 50 miles of one another, you know, and there were just tremendous numbers of outstanding football players. But in the town, the football coach was an important person, because the families knew that they were there to help augment and make their kids better, not only better players, but better people. And when I was growing up, the high school coach in the school was the guy that none of the players ever wanted to know that they got in trouble. They never wanted the coach to know they got in trouble.
Right, yeah.
So when the coaches were in the classrooms, there weren't issues. You know, and I worry about that today, because we have so many off-campus coaches, and they're not there to do that. But the respect that the coach held in the community, with the families, with the parents, you know, was spectacular. I mean, it was as much as what the at that time, small towns, the family doctor was a highly respected guy, but the coach was right next to him.
Wow, good stuff.
Kind of a neat thing, but I think it probably started way back, you know, and the idea was that if you could excel at something, maybe you wouldn't have to spend your whole life working like your dad did in the steel mills, you know, and everybody's dad kind of seemed like they worked in the steel mills. Now, it wasn't true, but everybody that you were kind of hung around with kind of was like that, and so athletes were not necessarily revered, they were respected for the work that they put in, because people knew that the coaches were asking them to do the right things. You know, it was going to be with dignity. You weren't going to be slapped around and verbally or physically, you know. But they were tough guys. They were tough-minded guys. They set standards and said, here's the line. You don't cross it. But that was no different from what we were getting at home. You know, it was the same generation, the World War II guys that had come home, you know, and now they were doing other things. A lot of my coaches were former servicemen that had been, you know, either in Korea or in World War II. Right. And they had a real perspective on things that were really, really tough versus what we say that going gets tough in football. It's not tough. I hear coaches saying, we're going to war this weekend, and I want to just say, you know, it's not even close to that. We have no idea what we're talking about.